important issues that are happening within WWE, and with how many rumors we have now, of course, speculating on, who's going to be the general manager of SmackDown, who's going to be the general manager of Raw, the possible brand split by SummerSlam. There are so many rumors going on with SmackDown going live, of course, and I think that Triple H is just pretty much choosing to take a back seat, which pretty much he has no choice to do right now. If we weren't talking about the brand split, hearing rumors about that, or hearing about how Dean Ambrose is being pushed now as a future champion down the road as Mr. Money in the Bank, or who's going to be the general manager of SmackDown, if we weren't hearing all these rumors on sites like ProWrestling.com and .net and PW Insider and PW Torch, I think that Triple H pretty much would probably be returning sooner than what we would expect to see Triple H. But what we're going to have time to get out of the way here are all these rumors about what's happening next with professional wrestling, as we're still trying to decipher what kind of direction we're headed in for events like Battleground and SummerSlam. There are a lot of rumors of a triple threat match between the three Shield members. That would be interesting to see. Seth Rollins versus Dean Ambrose versus Roman Reigns for the championship for the first time ever, based off their history as the Shield. I would really appreciate that. I think the diversity in that match would be awesome and would help us hype up for something bigger to happen at SummerSlam. Ultimately, that's what we're looking at, is the direction creatively for SummerSlam this year. 4 hours every year now, of course, SummerSlam. So it's just as big as what WrestleMania is. We're going to see a lot of big main events this year for SummerSlam, I think, and what we're pretty much looking at is who Triple H is going to feud with by SummerSlam. It seems like Triple H loves to wrestle at WrestleManias and SummerSlams, and we've seen Triple H do this occasionally over the last at least 5 years. For the last 5-year period, Triple H has pretty much never gone astray with events like WrestleMania and SummerSlam, so I don't think Triple H's return is that far away. I think that Triple H is going to be returning soon, regardless of who he feuds with. It could be against Roman Reigns again, it could be against Seth Rollins, it could be against Dean Ambrose or somebody else you least expect Triple H to return to have issues with. But regardless of who Triple H returns to feud with, it's going to be really interesting. And I think that with the pressure of being the COO, it has a lot to do with how much we see Triple H. I think that after wrestling for over 21, 22 years with the wrestling business, I think this is Triple H's 21st year working with WWE while others have come and gone. Triple H has always been there, and he's always had some kind of power with WWE. And because he's had this huge influence on the direction of WWE, there's a lot of pressure that goes with being both a COO and a wrestler, and I think Triple H is pretty much trying to juggle both occupations, being a wrestler and a COO, and I think with the pressure, that has a lot to do with how we don't see Triple H as much as probably as what we want to see Triple H. And the thing is, back in the day, Triple H was so irritable. He got on the nerves of everybody as champion. Nobody wanted to see Triple H as champion every week on Raw and SmackDown, dominating the WWE the way that he did. Of course, he won his first championship the night after SummerSlam 99 in a match with Mankind, and he went on to win numerous championships throughout his career. Nobody wanted to see Triple H being champion, and now, in 2016, people want to see more of people like Triple H because of the rare times that we see someone like Triple H wrestling. So you pretty much grown to appreciate the number of times that we see Triple H. And now that we don't get to see people like The Undertaker and Triple H and Shawn Michaels all the time, when they do wrestle, you're wanting to see more of them. So it's pretty interesting, how the times have changed over the years, and people's opinions on different wrestlers seem to have changed too. One time you couldn't stand Triple H, now you want to see more of Triple H. I find that to be pretty interesting and somewhat outstanding, because years ago everybody was irritated by Triple H being champion and Triple H's catchphrase of being the game, which I was irritated by. I'll be honest with you. I never really was the biggest Triple H fan in my younger years as a teenager watching professional wrestling. When Triple H would win 10 or 11 championships, he'd lose the title, win it back within 3 weeks, lose it, win it back within 3 weeks. The same kind of thing we're seeing with people like John Cena and Randy Orton happening all the time. And now with Roman Reigns, of course, being the new Stone Cold Steve Austin, putting his hands on the McMahons, trying to create some kind of storyline. Wasn't the biggest Triple H fan from years ago. Wasn't the biggest Shawn Michaels fan years later, when Triple H, of course, pretty much was getting one over on Shawn Michaels and becoming the more popular wrestler. Was never the biggest Triple H fan, and I don't think I ever will be the biggest Triple H fan. So that's pretty much why his absence in WWE is something that doesn't bother me, because I've been saying for months that Triple H had to go, the authority had to go, we had to change the direction with WWE, and I think that Triple H being off television gave wrestling fans what they had been asking for a really long time, which was a reprieve, because we saw Triple H and Stephanie coming out and really abusing power, if anything, with WWE, which there was no call for. I don't think it was necessary to have Triple H and Stephanie pretty much abusing power. You knew something was going to give, and there were a lot of rumors about Shane McMahon's return, which made the storylines that much more interesting when Shane's return actually was what was followed through with in the fall of the Fastlane this year when, of course, Stephanie was presented the Legacy Award, and then here comes Shane McMahon to claim his position of power with WWE wanting control of Monday Night Raw, and of course then he was put in this match with The Undertaker, which was a one-time deal. I would also like to see something in the way of probably Triple H versus Shane McMahon. Triple H returns and doesn't really agree with Shane McMahon's abuse of power, and then we see Triple H versus Shane McMahon for control of, say, Monday Night Raw or the COO position of WWE. That would be interesting too. Another rumor would be Shane McMahon versus Brock Lesnar if it wasn't Shane McMahon versus Triple H. So there are a lot of ways the return of Triple H could go. There's not necessarily just one specific person for Triple H to return to have issues with or to feud with. There are so many ways it can go. You know, we've talked about matches like Dean Ambrose versus Triple H versus Roman Reigns in a WrestleMania 32 rematch, Triple H versus Shane McMahon. There are a lot of ways it can go, and of course Triple H versus Seth Rollins. But out of all those matches, the one that I would probably be the most excited to see would be Triple H versus Seth Rollins, because of the similarities of their styles, just how, of course, Seth Rollins has patterned himself after Triple H. He's pretty much idolized Triple H throughout his entire career, and stealing the pedigree really teases the whole idea of Triple H versus Seth Rollins. I wouldn't care who would win this match between Triple H and Seth Rollins. I just want to see this match and just see, you know, how good the match actually would be and how Seth Rollins could hold his own against someone like Triple H, which I think he can do. He's proven himself in matches with Brock Lesnar and Sting in that phenomenal reign he had, of course, preceding his return, of course, over 200 plus days as champion. A lot of people feel that Seth Rollins pretty much was the replacement for CM Punk, and felt that, of course, he beat the record of CM Punk of holding it over 434 days, but he has not done that. But the thing is, Seth Rollins in that reign of over 200 plus days was a great champion, and I enjoyed seeing Seth Rollins in matches with Sting and Brock Lesnar. He really proved himself. He proved to be better than what a lot of people thought he was, and I wasn't the biggest Seth Rollins fan, especially with how he won the title. I didn't condone how Seth won the title at WrestleMania 31 over a year ago. I was really pissed off over that, and a lot of people heard my frustration, if anything, on how Seth Rollins became champion. If he would have became champion in a more formidable way than what he did, is the word I'm searching for here, I probably would more appreciate what Seth Rollins did in his reign as champion, but I just couldn't find time in appreciating Seth Rollins' reign as champion. You know, once he got past people like Dean Ambrose and Randy Orton and then started feuding with Sting and Brock Lesnar, that's when I started to have more respect for Seth Rollins, and with how, of course, Seth Rollins rehabilitated faster than a lot of people probably would from a knee injury. That's when pretty much I wanted to see Seth Rollins have this triumphant return, which pretty much there's no plan of him having had, especially with bigger things for Seth Rollins to do down the road. Obviously, Triple H versus Seth Rollins is one way of looking at it for the futures of both these two individuals. So there are a lot of ways this could go for Triple H's return, but, you know, regardless of how it goes, regardless if it's Dean Ambrose versus Triple H, or Roman Reigns versus Triple H, or Shane McMahon versus Triple H, or Seth Rollins versus Triple H, probably a four-way scenario is what we're looking at in the way of feuds. For Triple H, he may return and feud with virtually every single one of them, regardless of how we're looking at it for a future. For Triple H to have with professional wrestling, I don't think we've seen anything but the last of Triple H. Triple H pretty much is nowhere near retiring or giving up as a wrestler, and I spoke on the passion that Triple H has had for this business. I mean, if you didn't have a passion for this business, you would have left the business years ago. You would have went the same route of a Stone Cold Steve Austin or a Brock Lesnar, wanting to achieve more out of your career as an entertainer. But Triple H pretty much stayed, and he persevered. He showed a great deal of perseverance, so because of the perseverance that he's exemplified for years, I don't think we've seen the last of Triple H, and if anything, we'll see him return as early as SummerSlam. That's the date I'm speculating on for Triple H's return, and that's what I'm going with, SummerSlam 2016, even more so with how it's a 4-hour event now every year, and how SummerSlam's expanded over the last year and a half as a 4-hour event, and it's just as big as what WrestleMania is. You can't leave Triple H off the SummerSlam card this year, and you really can't afford to. With the limited number of legends you can't really rely on to wrestle. You can't always rely on The Undertaker. You can't always rely on this one or that one to always come in every year for WrestleManias and SummerSlam. So Triple H pretty much is guaranteed to be there at SummerSlam, regardless of who he has issues with or who he feuds with. We have not seen the last of Triple H as either a wrestler or the COO, and I spoke on the pressures of being COO, and I can only imagine what Triple H is having to deal with, all the pressures and stress going in and tying in significantly with being the COO of the company. If anything, Triple H is taking a back seat right now, and after that phenomenal program with Reigns, which pretty much has been the hype ever since last year, late 2016, I think, or 2015. I think pretty much that has a great deal of emphasis on why we're seeing Triple H in the status that he is right now with his absence obviously being very apparent, and the absence of a lot of people having been very apparent. John Cena's absence was just getting very apparent before he returned. Of course, this feud with AJ Styles is really interesting, and of course the absence of Randy Orton is something that has not gone astray. Everybody's still wondering about Randy Orton's status and whether or not we're going to be seeing Randy Orton returning to WWE. Just to update you, I think that Randy Orton is doing a lot of work on the network while recovering from this injury. Of course, his collarbone has been he's been prone out of this collarbone issue over the last number of months. Of course, he was at home taking out his garbage, which was reported on ProWrestling.com, and his collarbone pretty much broke, and pretty much that's been what people have been saying about Randy Orton over these last few months. But I think that, in time we'll get more answers to these questions that we have on these absences of wrestlers like John Cena we've seen in the past and Randy Orton. And again, it seems like there's so much happening in wrestling. I think that's why people are forgetting about Triple H and can find time and forgetting about Triple H. We have Dean Ambrose now as the Money in the Bank winner this year. Of course, the unpredictability of how Dean Ambrose will go about using the Money in the Bank briefcase to his advantage. Of course, there's that. And then, of course, there's this feud between John Cena and AJ Styles, where AJ Styles just recently defeated John Cena at the Money in the Bank pay-per-view to really solidify his legacy as a performer for all these years in Japan and TNA Wrestling, and then coming from there, going all the way to WWE. Of course, all the speculation on Randy Orton and his return possibly happening. I think that, and Seth Rollins too, tying in there with that shocking return at the Extreme Rules pay-per-view. So there's enough going on for us to kind of get sidetracked and forget about Triple H. But one thing you can be sure of is that we have not seen the last of Triple H, and the game is far from over. The game will be played again. We're just trying to figure out when, where, and how Triple H will reemerge and somewhat resurface in WWE, either as the COO or as a wrestler, returning to have issues with someone, regardless if it's Dean Ambrose, Roman Reigns, Shane McMahon, even Brock Lesnar, or The Undertaker. Whoever Triple H returns to have issues with, I don't think the game is far from over, and if anything, it's anything but game over, and we will see the return of Triple H by SummerSlam to feud with who I'm going with, Seth Rollins. That's what I want to see for Triple H. Triple H versus Seth Rollins. Let's get going with that, and let's give wrestling fans something to talk about and a reprieve that they've desperately wanted for a very long time. I know I've wanted this reprieve for what feels like forever. The same thing as often